Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our fireside chat titled Navigating the Future Advancing International Cooperation to Build Confidence in Cyberspace. Our moderator is Riz Khan, international journalist and TV host, Al Arabiya English. Our speaker is Doreen Bodgan-Martin, Secretary General, ITU. Riz, over to you.
Thank you very much, Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. One of the biggest challenges, but one of the big advantages of doing a forum like this is it's fast-paced. And I know I'm having to get straight into this because I have only 15 minutes to tap into the expertise of my guest here. Ms. Doreen Bodgan-Martin is the Secretary General of the International Telecommunications Union. And in the topics that we've been covering, one of the issues that has come up is how there is a need for greater international cooperation in order to build confidence in the cybersecurity space. I was pleased to discover, by the way, Ms. Bodgan-Martin is actually the first woman to head this organization, which has long-running roots. So the first time in 160 years.
That's right.
So I've been very honored to have guests, with this kind of achievement level. And we're seeing the world reshaping, so that's a very good thing. I'm going to start by just posing a couple of questions, if I may. And I guess one of the first things that would be of interest is that the World Summit on the Information Society Plus 20 review, the WSIS process, is now advancing. So how has the security landscape transformed in the 2 decades since that landmark WSIS event, the summit that took place in 2015, I think it was in 2 parts.
2 parts, 2003, 2005.
Not 15, 2005. That was my 20 years. And what are the most pressing challenges you're facing today?
Well, I think the landscape since then has changed dramatically. I mean, things are moving faster, getting smarter, being more complicated. And if we look back to 2003, 2005, those 2 phases, there were 1 billion people online, and we didn't have smartphones. So we fast forward to 2024, we have 5.4 billion people online. So the numbers in and of itself have changed things incredibly. Back in 2005, we were concerned about viruses. We were concerned about phishing. Some of us remember the attack on MySpace. Do you remember the MySpace attack, which was like the biggest attack at the time, when I think 1 million MySpace profiles were actually hacked? And then if we fast forward to July 2024, when we had the RockQ incident, 10 billion passwords were exposed. So again, I think it shows the big change and the big impact because things have become so much more complicated. We now have artificial intelligence, which is also in some ways complicating things. We have ransomware. We have so much more sophistication. But I would say, I think the World Summit back then, in some ways the outcome was somewhat ahead of its time because it actually put building trust, confidence, safety, and security at the heart of the information society. A few weeks ago, actually last week in New York, at the Summit of the Future, member states adopted the Pact of the Future and the Global Digital Compact, which also puts at the core building trust and safety in the use of digital technologies, and of course, in the cyber sphere. We know that cyber insecurity is amongst the top 10 risks as announced by the World Economic Forum. And it just goes to show us that we have to do more, we have to do better, and we have to address, coming to your point about the challenges, because there's gaps. There's about securing critical infrastructure, and there's the capacity gaps, in particular in developing countries, where we need to do more to build that capacity.
Just an add-on thought, based on what you just said, when you go from an attack of a particular size to like 10 billion, from millions to billions, when the summits were taking place, 2003, 2005, was there any notion that it would scale up on this level? I mean, looking ahead, setting a 20-year review, was there any idea it would be on such a great scale?
I mean, I don't think we ever imagined. Look at just the past year and a half and how generative AI has sort of swept the planet. So I don't think we understood how quickly the technology would evolve. But we knew that we had to be building safety by design in already back in the day.
Now, ICT, information and communications technology, it continues to evolve, as you just indicated, at an incredible pace. So one of the biggest issues now is, of course, strengthening global cybersecurity. How is that progressing? Is it on the right track? And can you highlight the areas where the most progress has been made and perhaps where there are still some gaps remaining?
Yeah. I think we are progressing on the right track, but we need to do more. We need to go faster. We need to go deeper. We have a global cybersecurity agenda that we laid out back in 2007, and I actually think it's still very relevant today. It highlights the importance of the kind of legal regulatory framework, the technical framework that's needed, the operational preparedness that countries need to put in place, the capacity building piece being critical, and then the last piece of that agenda is about cooperation. Cooperation domestically and of course cooperation internationally. We have seen from the ITU perspective more and more countries putting in place national cybersecurity strategies, which is a great first step. We have more than 120-something countries that have strategies. We also have a bit more that have put in place computer incident response teams. So we have CERTs, that's also good. But how effective are they? I think that's where we have to do more, and that goes to the point about capacity development. I think least developed countries, small island developing states, they need more support.
I mean, you're a global organization with a global responsibility. And the challenge, of course, now is we see the world in some instances, I know it's a variable thing, it goes up and down, but it seems to be going into blocks and silos. So cooperation must be a lot harder when you're having to deal with, especially when there's conflict involved too, but how are you coping with that, keeping it integrated?
So we have to look at it holistically. I think you're right on point there. It's not about telecommunications as a silo in and of itself as it was perhaps in the past. It's about digital and how it cuts across every sector of the economy. So the implications on if you have a cyber attack. I often think about the Bruce Willis Die Hard 4. And back then we thought, oh my God, could that ever happen? Well, it really can happen. And it shows that if there's an attack on the critical infrastructure, on the energy grid, if there's an attack on a healthcare institution, if there's an attack on a schooling, on a financial institution, it cuts across everything. And so cyber strategies need to be holistic, and they can't be addressing single silos.
Die Hard 4 is one thing. CrowdStrike did the same thing, and it wasn't even intentional. Now, keeping up with the skill sets needed to navigate the landscape of ICT and especially cybersecurity is obviously of a real concern. The global report on workforce shortage and skills gap has just been released, a shortage of 2.8 million in this particular sector. So what sort of picture does it paint in terms of the size of that, the size of that gap, and what sort of collective action can be taken to address that?
It's a big challenge. If we don't fill that gap, we're going to continue to be weak, I think in particular for more vulnerable populations, for developing countries, small island developing states. So I think we have to start younger. We have to start in our education systems. We just had a chat on child online protection. I think that's critical. So we have to be engaging young people to bring the understanding of what kind of careers look like when it comes to the digital space, when it comes to cybersecurity. So the education starting younger is critical. And to do that, I think we have to have good role models. We have to tackle perceptions and bias, because there's a lot of them. And we definitely, you mentioned you were in the session yesterday, we need more women, because the cyber workforce has a huge gap. We have an overall skills workforce gap, but we have a huge gap when it comes to women. That represents some 20% when it comes to cybersecurity. So I think More skilling is needed. Things like our Girls in ICT Day actually help expose opportunities, and we need governments to be investing in this as well.
Yesterday, in that panel on which I was moderating, it was interesting in my research to have discovered that you know, in the AI sector, for example, the percentage of women is about 22. It's very low. And yet, historically, women were more involved with computer sciences right through the early 20th century. In the 40s, it was almost like a peak, and then diminished because of, as you say, attitudes, the stigma that women can't be in computer sciences and engineering of this sort. And that is, I think, hopefully changing. Is that something you're finding?
It's changing slowly.
Really?
Too slowly. And I think we have to be more targeted when it comes to women in the tech sector, because it's a problem that continues. So if you don't have women when it comes to artificial intelligence, if they're not engaged in the development of algorithms, we will be creating AI that mirrors the bias that exists in our society today. So we need to have more women designing, creating when it comes to the tech space.
And it is interesting because if the women aren't there in the programming and the prompting, as it's now seen with AI, the bias is set into the computer science itself, and that can have a negative impact too.
Absolutely.
So what about at an international level, getting these skill sets raised? How are you able to encourage or collaborate that through your organization? What are you able to do?
So we have a number of skilling programs, including with the Kingdom, which is exciting.
That's right, yeah.
So we start with youth. We have a pretty robust youth program that offers skilling. We have an ITU Academy that also provides skilling for free, from basic digital literacy to more advanced skilling. We also just launched an artificial intelligence skilling coalition, which is also quite exciting. So we need to be skilling not just government representatives, but also the public at large.
And I guess, you know, in regions like the Middle East and countries like the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, there's no kind of legacy baggage. People are able to advance here very quickly. The changes are rapid, so the impact can be that much faster too.
Huge. I think the potential to leapfrog is tremendous, and of course I look to the Sustainable Development Goals. We have our 17 goals. 17% of the targets are on track, or off track, I should say. Actually, the UNSG said it was 15%, so it's actually much less. But with digital technologies, we can accelerate progress on almost every single target, every indicator, and every goal. And so it's a huge opportunity to leapfrog in every sector.
How receptive are you finding institutions and governments to your goals?
I think the results of the Summit of the Future and the Global Digital Compact speak for themselves. Member states united around a compact that embraces closing the digital divide, inclusive digital economies, free, safe, open internet, data governance, and artificial intelligence governance. So around those principles, I think it's pretty clear that the world wants an inclusive, safe digital future for all.
From what you have seen, certainly the progress we've talked about and how rapid it's been, what are your expectations for the next 20 years when it comes to the next review?
I think it's going to be very exciting. But at the same time, I'm also realistic. I do think that we have to put in place the right measures to balance the risks of cyber insecurity, the risks around misuse when it comes to artificial intelligence, the kind of scary things we see when it comes to deep fakes and other manipulations. So we do have to balance the regulatory frameworks with something that doesn't stifle innovation. We want that innovation. We know the benefits are huge, but we have to be managed and balanced in our approaches.
It's always that, isn't it? The balance between regulation and the freedom to move forward.
Yes.
Where is that balance right now?
It's still being discussed. I think you have a handful of countries that are leading the discussions, especially when it comes to artificial intelligence. At the ITU, we're trying to bring all those discussions to the table through our AI for Good Global Summit, also through the work that we do on our Global Cybersecurity Index, where we tier groups of countries. So trying to be able to share practices and make sure we we do better.
I guess one of the biggest benefits is all eyes are on this space now.
Absolutely.
And resources are being put in for it.
And it can do good, and that's what we want. We want to leverage digital technologies for good.
Well, Doreen Bodgan-Martin, so nice to speak with you. I'm sorry we have had to race through this, but it still was very productive. Big round of applause, please. Doreen Bodgan-Martin.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.